Okay, so getting ready for an education inspector interview, huh? That's got to be a job where you can really make a difference in education. We've got all these role catcher resources here, career guides, interview guides, even a look at their AI tools.
Hmm.
So ready to dive in and really make this interview a total slam dunk.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the key here is to really understand how in-depth this role is. It's not just, about checking for dusty textbooks or anything. It's about
Yeah.
making sure quality education is happening like across the board.
It does seem like it would take a certain kind of person to excel as an education inspector, right?
Yep.
Someone who really is passionate about education, but also has that good eye for detail and,
Yeah.
commitment to fairness and things like that.
Exactly. And those are the qualities that are really going to shine through in this successful interview. So RoleCatcher has provided some common interview questions we can look at. Let's walk through those and
Yeah.
like discuss some strategies for how to answer them in a way that's really going to, help you stand out.
Yeah, sounds good to me. What's the first one we're going to tackle?
Well, the first question is really a classic one. What inspired you to become an education inspector? It seems pretty straightforward, but there's some nuances to really nailing the answer to that.
Yeah, it's all about making a good first impression, right? So, what advice would you give to someone for making a strong first impression with this question?
I think the key is authenticity, you know? Really think about what got you interested in this field in the first place. Was it a specific experience, a mentor, the desire to really, make a difference? Share that story.
So, instead of just saying, "Oh, I'm passionate about education," you really want to dig a little deeper and show them, what ignited that passion for you.
Exactly. And don't forget the second part of that question. How did you prepare for this role?
Yeah.
This is where you want to highlight your qualifications, like, maybe you have a teaching degree or some experience in education or inspection roles.
Yeah.
But don't just list them. Explain how those experiences have prepared you to be an education inspector.
Yeah, show them that you've really thought about the path that led you here. I like it. Okay, what's next?
The next question focuses on your approach. It asks, what is your approach to evaluating the quality of education in a school or district? This one is a little more complex.
Yeah, I can see how this one might trip people up. It's not just about having an opinion, but about having a structured approach to evaluating.
Exactly. Think about the criteria you use to assess quality. Is it student performance, curriculum alignment, teacher effectiveness, or a combination of factors? Explain your methods for gathering evidence, like classroom observations, data analysis, interviews with stakeholders, and talk about how you would communicate your findings with a focus on clarity and collaboration.
So it's like you're showing them you have a system, right? A process, and that you're focused on working with the school and not just passing judgment. What kind of follow-up questions might they ask to kind of dig deeper into your approach?
Oh, they might ask for like specific examples of how you've gathered evidence in the past or how you've adapted your approach, based on the needs of a specific school.
Hmm.
So be prepared to show that you're flexible and that you can tailor your methods to different situations.
Makes sense. Now, I'm curious about how RoleCatcher's AI can help someone prepare for this type of question. What does it do?
Well, you can actually type your answer into the AI, and it'll give you feedback on how clear it is and the content, suggesting, maybe some areas you could improve. For example, it might say, oh, you should include more specific examples of your evaluation methods, or talk more about your experience with analyzing data.
So it's kind of like having a little interview coach right there in your pocket, helping you
Ah,
refine your answer and make sure you're hitting all the key points.
precisely.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Now we're at a question that I think a lot of people are afraid of. How do you handle conflicts or resistance from school administrators or staff during an inspection?
Oh, yeah. Those can be tough conversations.
Hmm.
How would you advise someone to approach this question?
Well, remember, this question is all about showing them how good you are at diplomacy and communication. The goal isn't to be confrontational, right? It's to work with them to improve education. So talk about how you build rapport, how you listen to concerns, and address misunderstandings calmly and respectfully.
So you want to de-escalate the situation and find common ground. Do you think it would be good to share an example of a time when you successfully dealt with a difficult situation?
Absolutely. A short story about how you took a situation that could have been really tense and turned it into a positive collaboration can be really impactful.
It's one thing to talk about your skills, but it's even better to show them how you've actually used them. But what kind of help does RoleCatcher's AI give when you're trying to come up with these stories?
Well, it can help you make sure your story is short and relevant, and that it's really focused on your strengths. It might also give you ideas for how to connect your story back to what the job requires or the school's goals.
Oh, that's really helpful. It takes the guesswork out of storytelling and helps you present your experience in the best possible light.
Right. And speaking of effectiveness, the next question asks, how do you stay up to date with changes in education policy and standards?
Makes sense. Education's always changing. So they probably want to know that you're committed to keeping up with everything new. What's the best way to show them that?
This is where you get to show off how committed you are to constantly learning and growing professionally. Talk about conferences or workshops you've been to, journals or newsletters you read, professional organizations you belong to. Maybe you follow a blog or an online community. The key is to show them that you're not just aware of changes, but that you're actively seeking them out.
So you're proactive and really engaged with what's happening in education. I'm curious, what are some of the resources or organizations that RoleCatcher recommends in their career guide?
They mention a few really well-respected ones like the National Association of Education Inspectors and the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development. They also talk about how important it is to stay informed about local and regional policy changes too.
So you need a good understanding of education on like a national and local level.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, what's next?
Okay, this one is a big one. It asks, how do you balance the need for accountability with the need for support and professional development for educators? It's a tough balance to strike.
Yeah, that's a really hard one. You're there to assess them, but you also want to help schools get better. How do you answer that without sounding like you're contradicting yourself?
Talk about how you provide constructive feedback. Do you focus on the good things as well as the areas that need work? Do you offer resources and mentorship to help educators improve? They want to see that you can be a critical evaluator and a supportive partner.
Finding that sweet spot between holding schools accountable and helping them improve. I like how RoleCatcher talks about that supportive side. It's not just about finding fault. It's about working together to make things better.
Absolutely. Okay, now I want to hear what you think about this next question. It asks, how do you ensure that your inspections are fair and unbiased?
That one seems really important, especially in education.
Mm-hmm.
When you're dealing with people's careers and the futures of students, it's a lot of responsibility.
It is. And they're looking for concrete strategies, not just you saying, oh, I'm fair. So talk about how you stay objective when you're collecting and analyzing data. Maybe you use standardized observation protocols or rely on multiple sources of evidence.
So it's like having a system to make sure you're not biased. Can you explain what those standardized observation protocols are and why they're important?
They're basically like structured frameworks. They tell you exactly what to look for when you're observing a classroom. That way, everyone is being evaluated in the same way.
So instead of relying on your gut feeling, you're using a set of guidelines. That makes a lot of sense.
And transparency is important too. Explain how you would communicate your process to the school and address any concerns they might have. And of course, make sure you don't have any conflicts of interest.
It's about building trust and showing them that you're committed to being fair. Okay? What else might they ask to see if you really understand what fairness and objectivity mean?
They might ask about a time when someone thought you were biased and how you handled it. Or they might ask what you would do if you had a personal connection to a school you were inspecting. Be ready to give specific examples that show you're honest and professional.
That's great advice. Be prepared for those tricky situations and show them that you have the experience and the good judgment to handle them the right way. All right, what's the next interview question?
This one asks, how do you collaborate with school administrators and staff to support improvements in education quality?
So it's like a continuation of that idea of partnership, right? It was not just about finding problems. It's about working together to fix them.
Exactly. Here you can really talk about your interpersonal skills. So, building trust and rapport, facilitating open communication, working together to make action plans. Maybe you have an example of a time when your input helped a school make positive changes.
Help them see you as a valuable resource and not just someone who comes in to criticize them. What are some of the skills or qualities that RoleCatcher says are important for being a good collaborator in this role?
They talk about active listening, empathy, conflict resolution, and being able to get everyone on the same page even if they have different opinions. They also say that it's important to be culturally sensitive and committed to equity.
Sounds like you need to be a diplomat, a mentor, and a facilitator all at once. Wow. All right, let's move on to the next question. What is it?
Okay, so this one asks, how do you handle sensitive or confidential information during an inspection? This is where your integrity and professionalism are really, really important.
That's especially important in education, right? When you're dealing with things like student records and personnel files and all that sensitive data, how do you make sure the interviewer knows that you understand how serious this is?
Be very clear about understanding confidentiality rules and say that you're committed to following them. Talk about your experience with handling sensitive information responsibly, like student records, personnel files, financial data. They want to know that you'll handle confidential information very carefully.
So build that trust and show them that you understand the rules and ethics about this kind of information. What kind of follow-up questions might they ask to make sure you really get confidentiality?
Hmm. They might give you like a hypothetical situation. What would you do if someone accidentally shared confidential information? Or they might ask about the steps you take to keep information safe, both physically and digitally.
You need to show that you're proactive and really thinking about data security. Okay, we've gone over a lot already. What's the last interview question we're going to look at in a deep dive?
The last one focuses on a really important skill. It asks, how do you approach providing feedback to educators during an inspection? This can be a really crucial moment.
I can imagine. It's a delicate balance, right? You need to be honest and direct, but also encouraging and supportive.
Yeah.
What are your tips for finding that balance?
Explain how you give feedback in a way that's constructive, specific, and gives them something to actually work with. Do you focus on what they do rather than who they are? Do you offer concrete suggestions for improvement? Do you let educators ask questions and make sure they understand? The goal is to make them see feedback as a chance to grow, not as a personal attack.
So be clear, specific, and supportive, even when you're talking about things they need to improve. That's a skill in itself. What are some examples of good ways to phrase feedback that RoleCatcher suggests?
They say you should use I statements. Talk about things you actually observed and give specific examples. They also say it's important to end on a positive note and say that you think the educator can improve.
You're basically saying, we're in this together, let's work on this together. So how can RoleCatcher's AI help people practice giving feedback like that?
They have this really cool feature where you can practice giving feedback in a video simulation. The AI analyzes your tone of voice, your body language, and the words you use. Then it gives you suggestions for how to improve.
That's so cool. It's like having a mirror that helps you improve your communication skills and make sure you sound supportive and professional.
Exactly. And that kind of preparation can make a big difference in how well you do in an interview.
Wow, you've given me a lot to think about. But before we move on to the next part, is there anything else from the RoleCatcher resources that we haven't talked about yet? Something that really stood out to you?
One thing that I thought was really interesting was how much they emphasize building a portfolio. They say it's a great way to stand out from other candidates.
So it's like having proof of what you've accomplished. What kind of things would be good to put in a portfolio for this kind of job?
Reports that show you can find problems, analyze data, and make recommendations based on evidence would be really good. You could also include things like professional development materials you've created or presentations you've given.
So it's all about showing them what you know and how passionate you are about making education better. Okay, let's take a quick break, and then we'll be right back to keep exploring the world of education inspectors.
We're back. And I'm still thinking about that portfolio thing. It's so smart to show them what you can actually do. That's what's going to make you stand out. But before we go too far, I think we should go back to that RoleCatcher career guide for a minute and really break down the skills you need to be successful in this job.
Yeah, you're right. Let's get back to basics. So RoleCatcher lays out the different stages of the career, right? From trainee to senior inspector. Obviously, the more you move up, the more is expected of you. But what are the basic skills that every aspiring education inspector needs?
RoleCatcher is very clear about this. You absolutely have to have a solid understanding of the laws and regulations about education. You're going to be evaluating schools based on those standards, so you need to know them like the back of your hand.
Right, of course. But it's not just about memorizing rules, right? You need to be able to apply them in the real world, which takes good judgment and a nuanced understanding of how education actually works.
Exactly. And that's where things like observation, critical thinking, and analytical reasoning are so important. You'll be observing classrooms, looking at data, evaluating programs, and you have to be able to do all of that with a sharp eye for detail and stay objective.
So it's kind of like being a detective, right? You're piecing together information from different sources to get a full picture of how the school is doing. Speaking of data,
Yeah.
what kinds of data would an education inspector typically analyze? I'm guessing it's not just test scores.
You're right. It's about looking at the whole picture. So they might look at things like attendance records, graduation rates, disciplinary data, even surveys from students, teachers, and parents. It's all about finding trends and patterns and figuring out where the school is doing well and where they might be struggling.
So you're connecting the dots and using data to tell a story about the school's overall effectiveness. Now, once you've gathered all this information, you need to be able to communicate it clearly and convincingly. I'm guessing strong communication skills are pretty important here.
Absolutely essential. You're going to be writing reports, giving presentations, providing feedback to school administrators and staff. So being able to communicate clearly, concisely, and professionally is super important if you want people to understand you and take action.
Okay, so we've got the legal knowledge, the observational and analytical skills, and the communication skills. What else is in the education inspector's toolkit? It feels like there's more to it.
Well, remember how we were talking about collaboration and support? Being good at that requires really strong interpersonal skills. You're going to be interacting with teachers, administrators, students, parents, even community members. So building relationships, active listening, and conflict resolution are all really important for making those relationships work.
So you need to be a diplomat, a mentor, and a facilitator all at once. RoleCatcher really highlights that human side of the job. It's not just about inspecting, it's about connecting with people.
Exactly. And let's not forget about cultural sensitivity and a commitment to equity history. Education inspectors play a huge role in making sure all students have access to a quality education, no matter who they are or what their background is.
That's a good point. It's not just about checking boxes and making sure people are following the rules. It's about advocating for students and making sure everyone has a fair chance to learn.
Now, as you move up in your career, you might find yourself taking on more specialized roles or focusing on certain areas within education.
The career guide mentions some specializations, right? I'm
Yeah.
curious to hear more about that.
Yeah.
What are some of the paths an education inspector could choose to explore?
RoleCatcher gives some examples, but it really depends on the needs of your specific region or district. You might specialize in something like early childhood education, special education, or curriculum development. You could even focus on school safety technology integration or data analysis.
There's so much variety. It sounds like you could have a really fulfilling career as an education inspector. It's inspiring to think about all the different ways you could help improve education.
And speaking of building a career, RoleCatcher has some great advice on professional development and how to move up in your career. Remember those certifications we talked about? Getting those shows that you're really an expert and committed to the field.
The Certified Education Inspector credential definitely caught my eye. What other certifications might be valuable for this kind of work? Are there any that are specific to those specializations we just talked about?
It depends on what you want to do and what you're interested in. The career guide also mentions certifications like certified school administrator, certified school counselor, and certified school psychologist. These certifications can help you learn more about specific parts of the education system and open up new possibilities for growth.
It's like constantly leveling up your skills and knowledge. I bet potential employers really like to see that kind of commitment to continuous learning.
Absolutely. And remember, RoleCatcher's AI tools can be really helpful in figuring out your professional development path.
That's right. How can someone use RoleCatcher's AI to make good decisions about certifications or other professional development opportunities?
You can tell the platform what your career goals are and what you're interested in, and it will suggest certifications courses and even conferences that are a good fit for you. It can also give you personalized feedback on your resume and cover letter to help you highlight your qualifications.
That's awesome. It's like having your own personal career advisor.
Hmm.
Okay, let's be real for a minute. How competitive is this field? Is it hard to get a job as an education inspector?
It's true that it can be really competitive, especially for entry-level positions. But RoleCatcher gives some good advice on how to make yourself stand out. Remember how we talked about building a portfolio to show off your inspection reports and findings? That's a great way to prove to employers that you have the experience and expertise they're looking for.
It's like having tangible evidence of what you can do.
Yeah.
What other advice does RoleCatcher give for finding a job?
They say networking is really important. Go to conferences, join professional organizations, meet people in the field. Building relationships can open doors and create opportunities that you might not find otherwise.
So it's not just what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah.
That's true for a lot of careers, I guess.
Mm.
But in a field like education, where relationships are so important, it makes even more sense.
You're right. And speaking of relationships, let's go back to those interview questions for a minute. We've already talked about some of the most common ones, but I think it's worth thinking about how those questions relate to building good relationships with the people you'll be working with.
I like that. So it's not just about giving the right answers. It's about showing your personality and how you approach the role. It's about letting them get to know you and see how you would fit in with their team.
Exactly. For example, when they ask about how you evaluate the quality of education, it's not just about listing off criteria. It's about showing them that you understand how complex schools are and that you're committed to working with educators to find solutions.
It's about being a partner in improvement, not just an inspector. You're there to help them grow, not just judge them.
Exactly. And when they ask about how you handle conflicts or resistance, it's not just about talking about your conflict resolution skills. It's about showing empathy, respect, and being willing to listen to different points of view.
It's about being professional and graceful when things get tough. You're not there to create problems. You're there to find solutions.
And when they ask about how you give feedback, it's not just about being constructive and specific, it's about showing that you genuinely want to help educators improve and develop their
It's
skills.
about being a mentor and a guide,
Yeah.
not just someone who evaluates them.
Those are just a few examples. But the main takeaway is that your answers should show off your knowledge and experience, but also your personality, your values, and your approach to being an education inspector.
You want to paint a complete picture of who you are as a professional and what you bring to the table. You're not just qualified for the job, you're the right fit for their school community.
Exactly. Now, I know we've covered a lot in this deep dive, and it might feel a little overwhelming. But remember, RoleCatcher has all these resources to help you every step of the way. From understanding the job, to writing your resume, to acing the interview.
And don't forget those amazing AI tools. That personalized feedback and practice can really boost your confidence and help you do your best. It's like having a secret weapon.
Absolutely. So take a deep breath, check out the resources, and believe in yourself. You got this.
You give me so much to think about. But before we wrap up this part, is there one piece of advice you would give to someone who's just starting out in this career? What's the most important thing to keep in mind?
That's a good question. I think the most important thing is to have a real passion for education. This job isn't just about rules and regulations, it's about making a difference in the lives of students and helping to shape the future of our society. If you really care about education, that will show in everything you do, from how you interact with educators to the quality of your work. And that passion will help you through the tough times and make the good times even better.
That's beautiful. Okay, everyone, let that sink in for a minute.
Yeah.
We'll be right back to finish our deep dive into the world of education inspectors.
All right, we're back for the last part of our deep dive into becoming an education inspector. And I'm feeling a lot more prepared for this interview now, thanks to all this stuff from RoleCatcher. But even beyond the interview, I'm really starting to understand what this career is all about.
I'm glad to hear that.
Hmm.
As we've been talking about all these resources, it really hit me how much they emphasize always learning and growing. It's not enough to just get the job. You got to keep learning and expanding what.
So true. It's like education itself. It never really ends. And in a field like this, that's always changing. You got to stay ahead of the game. But where do you even start? There are so many different ways you could go with this career.
Yeah, that's true. But I think RoleCatcher gives you a really good way to think about professional development. They talk about getting more degrees, going to conferences and workshops, joining professional organizations, even writing articles or giving presentations. So many options. It's like you're creating your own educational path.
Hmm.
And it shows employers that you're serious about staying on top of things.
What about mentors, though? Do you think having a mentor is important in this field?
Oh, absolutely. Finding a mentor, someone who can give you advice and share their experience, can be so valuable, especially when you're just starting out. And then as you get more experience, you can be a mentor for someone else. It's a really cool cycle.
It's like having someone to help you navigate your career path. And in a job like this, where you're often working on your own, having that support can make a big difference. I'm also curious about technology, though. Does RoleCatcher talk about that?
They do. Remember how they said it's important to stay up to date with what's happening in the field? Well, technology is a big part of that. Think about things like online learning, educational software, data analytics.
Yeah.
Education inspectors need to know about all that stuff.
It's like technology is changing everything about education, and education inspectors are right there, seeing how it's all affecting teaching and learning. But how do you keep up with it all? It's changing so fast. I know, it can feel overwhelming. But that's where those professional development strategies come in. Subscribe to journals and newsletters, follow experts on social media, go to webinars and online courses. There are lots of ways to stay informed.
Be proactive.
Yeah.
Right? Take charge of your own learning. Embrace that lifelong learning thing. Okay, so we've talked about skills, career path, the importance of learning and growing, even technology. Anything else we need to cover before we wrap up?
I think we've pretty much hit everything. But before we go, I want to bring up that legacy question again.
Right.
Remember, it's not just about getting the job. It's about making a difference. So while you're preparing for this interview and as you start this career, keep asking yourself, what kind of impact do I want to have on education?
That's such a powerful question to think about. It's about finding your purpose, your passion, and doing something that goes beyond just the everyday tasks.
Mhm.
It's about using what you know to help students and create a better and fairer education system. I love that.
And I have a feeling you're going to do great things in this field. You have the enthusiasm, the curiosity, and the drive to really make a difference.
Thanks for saying that. I'm feeling a lot more prepared and excited about this opportunity now.
That's what we're here for. Remember, knowledge is power, and you've learned a lot today thanks to RoleCatcher. So go out there and ace that interview.
I will.
Yeah.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of education inspectors. We hope you found it helpful and inspiring. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep making a difference in the world.